Welcome everyone. I hope your morning meetings have been productive. This afternoon's session is titled Structures and Systems Innovations for Energy Efficiency. I'll be honest, this is the one I've been looking forward to the most over the 2-day span. I think there's a lot of interesting things. And part of my own personal bias is that earlier in my career, I worked in the electronic security industry, kind of the ADTs of the world, in operations and customer experience. And I was at a company many of you might be familiar with called Savant in 2010, and was asked to be on a small little business development team to look into solar and to explore the possibility of them opening a solar division. And that was the seedlings of the whole other spin-off company that went public called Vivint Solar. And really was interesting to see solar go mainstream. And we've seen so many other energy efficiency technologies go mainstream over the last decade or two. So to start off, we've already done my introduction, but let's introduce some of our speakers here. Some we've seen before, some we haven't. So Aaron, can you introduce yourself again?
Hi, Aaron Gutin from Savant Systems.
We'll make sure we got the audio on here.
The automation guy should turn on the mic, right? Aaron Gutin, Savant Systems. Thanks for having lunch with us.
And next up, Scott.
Hi, Scott Sumetz, Director of Enterprise Accounts at GAF Energy, and happy to be here and sharing this technology with you, this conversation.
Okay, and another returning guest, Dennis.
I'm Dennis Webb, Vice President of Fulton Homes, based here in Phoenix, so I didn't have to travel too far. So happy to be with you. Thanks for joining us.
So today we're just going to dive right into it. As we've looked at energy efficiency, the first question I want to throw out to our panels is, when we look at a traditional home that's already 15, 20 years old, how much gain in efficiency are we already seeing in new homes today versus a 20-year-old home? Do we know what kind of the estimated efficiency differential is with a new home today versus 20 years ago?
It's huge. It's unbelievable. When we first started doing Energy Star, which was like 2007, we thought, well, gosh, if we can get our HERS ratings down below 80, we're going to be great. Now our HERS ratings are in the 40s. It's just amazing. The technology has spurned just building a better home. The homes are well insulated, they're tighter, they're more energy efficient, they're healthier. It's unbelievable. Even the homes built 5 years ago are not what they are today. We've made such tremendous gains. And I think a lot of it is the federal programs, and they've kind of helped us along as builders and the whole industry. And so Energy Star started it, and Energy Star for Homes was really the first major program, and people just jumped on that. This town, unbelievably, 95% of the builders use Energy Star. It's incredible. It's the highest Energy Star usage in the country. Then we did Indoor Air Plus. That was another EPA thing. And then WaterSense, that was another EPA thing. And then the last one is Zero Energy Ready Homes. And so the Zero Energy Ready Homes are the very, very best homes built in the country today. And you can really take advantage of that. So it's just unbelievable the progress that the industry's made. They've made more progress in energy efficiency than any other aspect of the business.
Yeah, and I think the challenge becomes, because that's from the new homes perspective, but if you're looking at a 20-year-old, 30-year-old home, how do we now remodel that home and make it up to code, make it as efficient as possible? Because a lot of
just build new homes. That's all we want to hear about here.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the challenge in that,
I don't want the used house.
Exactly. The challenge is it's usually energy efficiency components are not the first thing that comes to mind when you're remodeling a home. It's the kitchen, it's the bath, it's the carpet, the floors, the paint. And I think as technology has started to become more mainstream and energy efficient, like the LED light bulbs, it's like, hey, that's a common thing now, right? But for a long time, that was not a common thing. Everybody had to swap those out. So you're seeing technology push, even the remodel business and existing home business. I think that's a great thing for the whole entire industry. But again, it's not the first thing people think about. In some parts of the country, it may be like Arizona with a high heat bill, but or AC bill. But yeah.
Great. Anything?
No, I completely agree with Scott. I live in a house that was largely built in 1932. It is incredibly inefficient. The walls are lined with metal. There's no insulation because I guess in California then they decided they didn't need it. And so, for me, it was the first step as a homeowner was new windows. Because there was tons of hot air coming in the summer and cool air coming in the winter, and that changed the house immensely. So there are some things the average customer can reach for and afford, whether they're, financing new windows that are more energy efficient or re-insulating. But largely, that's probably our biggest challenge as a country is the existing inventory needs to be somehow brought into a more efficient footing.
Are we approaching a spot of diminishing returns on energy efficiency investments, or does it look like there's still, you just mentioned going from 80 to 40, and we'll talk a little bit about the Hertz scale more, but do you still see in the future that that's going to continue to see great advancements?
Yeah, we're not even close.
Yeah.
When solar becomes affordable and readily available all over the country, that will make a huge difference. When the grid can handle it and things like that. So I don't even know if we're halfway there. I think the future is going to be unbelievable. And with the technology of, we don't make homes with very good materials these days. We have concrete that cracks, and we have paint that chips and peels and fades. We have 2x4s that termites eat and they twist, and so we're using the very poorest materials to build our houses, and they're still pretty efficient. What happens if we build a house in a factory?
Yeah.
And it's super efficient. It's going to be incredible. So I don't think we're even close.
Yeah, I agree. I think the technology itself, as a home building, industry, like you said, factory. Some of the SIP panels, all the things that are being manufactured now to make a tighter house. It's the technology of all the components of that house too. You've got that pushing, but you also have the building industry changing too and adopting that. So I think I agree with you. We're in the very early stages of this. I don't think we're even close.
As we see greater adoption of solar, we know that'll transform the grid in many ways if people really adopt that technology. Does it create a tipping point though that now I'm creating my own energy, I don't really care as much about the energy I'm using in my house, because as long as it's being covered by my daily production of the sun, so what?
So what we call in the industry, I've been in the industry for 12, 13 years in solar, and so what we call that is a lifestyle. So it's either economic or it's lifestyle. Typically, customers want both. So what ends up happening is they get solar to save money, but then they enjoy their cooler or warmer house and they use a little bit more energy. And so they ask you to go back and relook at their bill. And it's funny because you're like, hey, you use more kilowatts, but that's an okay thing. Your lifestyle's a little different. You've enjoyed life a little bit. You don't have to crimp as much on your AC bill and sweat. So I think you're right. I think there is a tipping point, but I think we've got a ways to go even in solar. For that to happen, because we've got an energy grid that's kind of dilapidating, and we've got a lot of infrastructure there, and distributed generation does well for the grid, like you mentioned, but we still have a long way to go to shore that up.
So we know that being more energy efficient for the end user primarily translates into lower costs. Are there other tangible benefits besides spending less money that a homeowner will have as a result of implementing energy efficient products in their home?
Well, you're going to be more comfortable, and you're going to have a much better life, and you're going to take advantage of all these health issues as well.
Which goes to comfort
Comfort
topic we talked about yesterday.
Clean air and knowing we're going to save the planet and reduce carbon emissions and all that stuff. It all goes hand in hand. So I think that the future is pretty good. I think that we're on the right track.
I like that. And Dennis, you started off talking about some of the federal rebates, which is, can you compare and contrast? Because yesterday we were talking about some of the mandates. What is different about energy efficiency that you feel like has really been effective in moving the needle?
I think I think the various city codes and state codes are a very low bar that builders have to do. They're building the least, almost illegal home that they can. They're just barely above code, you know, and they're not helping the public that much. But I think all these agencies had really come in and said, well, we're not only gonna you know, help you with taxes and things like that, but we're gonna help you create a better home. And so the things that they require now, and they go through the things every year. So Energy Star is now doing their 3.2, and Indoor Air Plus is doing now their 2.0, and then Zero Energy Ready, they're doing 4.2. I think I got the numbers right. It doesn't really matter, just each one is harder, and you have to do more. But as a result, we're building a much, much better house. And I think that there's also the utility rebates that no one talks about, but those are huge numbers. The numbers we get from SRP in this market are unbelievable. And the numbers we get from APS over on the west side of town are substantial, not quite as good as SRP, but you know, we're working on it. But I think, you know, we're trying to just build a better house. And I think these agencies and then our raters that, you know, check out every house, and you know, the consumer has a tremendous confidence in you that you're going to build the right house if you're doing all these things. Yeah. And that we use it as a marketing advantage to say, hey, we're going to build a better house than the guy down the street, so why don't you buy our house, and it'll be more comfortable, it's more energy efficient, and you'll save money. And if you don't tell people that, then you're wasting your dollars, you know. So take that marketing message and make sure that everyone understands it, and it sets you apart from the competition.
In what way, Scott, can builders be educated about these different incentives that exist to be able to encourage these energy efficient practices?
Well, I think what's interesting about Dennis's story about Fulton is they made a decision early on to just build a better house. It wasn't economic, really. I mean, economic makes some sense. You want to chase the 45L, some of the credits that are available. But I think in talking with Dennis earlier, we had a chance to talk, you know, it was a decision that Fulton made just to, you know, produce a better house and use it as a marketing tool. Which
strategically differentiate between the competition.
So I think when you see industry leaders like that come out and do that, now you're starting to see some of the national builders, you know, take notice of that. I think also, you know, some of the NEC code is updating, right? So you got some in Washington that is chasing the 2023. We have, you know, some folks, Indiana, I think is on 2008 NEC code. So we don't have, I think 25% of the country is still on old NEC code, where some of the new code requirements then are encouraging and mandating that we make those changes. So I think you have two things. I think you have that part of it that we need to shore up, but then you've got industry leaders like Fulton Homes. And then the other thing I think is consumer demand. As this, you know, buyer, sophisticated buyer, first-time home buyer, second-time home buyer, people are just expecting to have these kind of things in their home now. And I think that's a huge differentiator between a builder that has it and is not. So ultimately, if somebody walks into his home versus somebody that's not doing that, there's going to be a noticeable difference, and consumer demand is going to force more builders to take note and meet that demand, if that makes sense.
I'm kind of curious with our audience here. This is maybe a little bit loaded question depending upon your role within the company, but how many of you, by show of hand, would say that you feel that the philosophy of your company is really just to clear the bar when it comes to code? Okay, that's good. That's probably why they're here.
Exactly.
To really be willing to push beyond the code and look for ways to build a better home. So,
if I could ask a question, how many people are building to Energy Star standards?
Hey,
okay, so
about
about a third.
That's almost 2/3.
How many people are doing Indoor Air Plus? Okay. Anyone doing Zero Energy Ready? Now we're talking. This is great. Congratulations.
Yeah.
You guys are in the elite group.
Absolutely agree.
How are you seeing, Aaron, incentives like these? And we'll kind of talk about the 45L tax credit here in just a second. How are you seeing these help drive the adoption of smart home technology for energy management?
So yeah, I was going to say we see this on the consumer side. So I agree with what Scott said. You know, consumer demand is catching up to Fulton in a way. The younger generation buying a new house is interested in this. So everyone likes to be told you can save some money at the end of the year, especially if they're building a house, because the checks are going out and they don't see a house for a long time. And so we have a lot of consumers that they're inquiring about a microgrid because economics or lifestyle or both, and are surprised to learn still there's a government program that would actually give them some tax incentive. And so when that happens, usually they're more keen to lean in and listen. We've seen it not drive the ultimate decision because they made it to us, but it's a positive contributing factor. It's in the pro column when they're going to, well, should I do this or shouldn't I? It's certainly in the pro column, especially because most of those consumers, at least that we're seeing, they're either a very successful person by their own rights, working for a company as someone, or they're self-employed and they're self-made. And so in both regards, that looking at your tax liability at the end of the year, combined with the ROI on the investment and the feeling good about being green and being the only house with the Super Bowl on when SCE goes out or something like that, that's all in there too. But it certainly is driving that decision in a important, but I would say sort of small way.
Sure. So looking at, I guess by show of hands, how many of you are taking advantage of the 45L tax credit in your building? So about half. Okay, so for those that didn't raise your hand, we'll do just a quick overview of what this is. Dennis is definitely our resident expert here, but tax credit, you can get up to $2,500 for homes that are meeting Energy Star requirements, up to $5,000 for homes certified as zero energy ready homes. Eligible projects can be single family homes, ADUs, anything that's doing substantial reconstruction or rehabilitation. And the beneficiaries of that directly benefit you as a qualified builder or developer. There's certainly some indirect benefits to the homeowner in terms of lower energy bills. The certification process, you're getting certifications of efficiency from an independent qualified rater. They have to be accredited by ResNet or a similar rating network. The tax credit claim is available for newly constructed energy efficient homes and can be then carried forward for up to 20 years if unused. And then the standards are, looking at the dwelling's heating and cooling energy consumption, it has to fall below certain national energy standards. Anything that any of you would add to that would kind of supplement that?
One of the important things is it's going to last 12 years. And before, the tax credit would be, they'd go until the end of the year, and then Congress wouldn't pass it, and you're kind of waiting to see if you're going to do it. In our case, we've been doing these tax credits for the last 15 years, and so it's a sizable amount. When you're building a lot of homes and you're getting $2,000, even $2,000 a house, it's a lot of money. We're talking $2 million. We kind of count on, hopefully the Congress will pass and things like that. So the good thing about this, it's 12 years. It goes for a long time.
So there's not that risk that it's going to go away, which kind of inhibits or some builders may be like, I don't know if we're going to gear up to do that, only to know we have to scale back in a year.
And I think the big thing is if you're doing Energy Star already, you have a tremendous lead over all the other guys that don't do that, because the stretch between Energy Star, you really just have to do two more things to get the full 5,000, and that is go to Indoor Air Plus, because that's a requirement for zero energy ready, and then zero energy ready. But you're already doing a checklist. Your house is already being inspected by your raters. You're halfway there, so the cost is minimal. That $2,500 for the maximum amount, which we're taking $2,500 more, so that's a lot of money, and so we're taking advantage, and we're going to be taking $5,000 a house. That's a lot of money.
Question, I'm traveling the country this year, talking to builders of all shapes and sizes across the nation, and the biggest argument or the biggest objection I get is, well, it's going to cost me more than I get back in that. What would you say to somebody, the builder that says...
You don't do math very well. you don't add very well, So I'm involved in the EWA organization, the Energy and Environmental Building Alliance. So we had a conference about 3 weeks ago. We had 500 people in Salt Lake City, and so many of you were there. And one thing that is really unusual for our organization. We're seeing a tremendous amount of national builders get involved with our organization. We've always been high performance builders all around the country, small, large, but mostly smaller. Now we're seeing national people, and there's two reasons why they're showing up. One is 45L, and the other is ESG, because they need to have that ESG part of their investor portfolio and everything like that, and we're pretty good at that, and so they're coming to us for help. But the big thing is everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon with 45L. So you got all these national guys that are scrambling, and they can't get it fast enough because it takes a while, because you got to make sure you're doing all that stuff.
You're fine. Don't worry about it.
And then with the way the codes are and the way the things are, they've got to have different things. So for instance, Indoor Air Plus is going to change the way that their requirements, so you have to have your houses permitted by a certain time and things like that. So it gets kind of intricate, and that's why the national guys are kind of leaning to us for help.
So I think there was a really interesting point there that we hadn't talked about in any of our earlier discussions, that if you're doing this, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying it might be easier to get capital because there are investors out that are looking for ways that they can invest money that can meet their ESG goals.
Sure.
So that also plays into your question as to if it doesn't make sense. Well, that could be a reason alone why you would do it if it opens up additional investment to be able to fund building. Another topic or another word you used a couple discussions ago was about resiliency. And we just had this morning a whole session on resiliency. And one of the things we didn't talk about there is we were talking about resiliency when you're shaking the building. But here we're talking about resiliency that if the grid goes down and that you can continue to operate. And I think there's a lot of value behind that. During the summer, my wife's parents invited all of her siblings and the adults on a Hawaii trip. They were using grandma's inheritance money to go do this fun experience. And we went and visited one of my brother-in-law's friends who lives on the Big Island. And they basically have homesteaded there. They bought some land and they built from scratch. And they had all solar, they had water catchment system, and it was just like, as I'm asking questions about it, wasn't a huge home, but it was a very comfortable home. They have 2 solar vehicles that they're able to charge using the solar panels and the battery in the home, completely off the grid. And I just started asking lots of questions about this because it's really fascinating to see, it was a fairly small scale, how self-sufficient they were, and made it seem a lot more achievable. Like, yeah, why aren't we doing this more in communities, both in terms of the energy, obviously, and then certainly the water. How are you seeing just the demand for resiliency of wanting to be able to survive without the grid driving consumer decisions?
I think everything that's happening in the world today is forcing people to take another look at what if, and the grid, as vulnerable as it is, not having power will be devastating to homes. And so when you look at the technology that's out there, the batteries, the whole home backup, the solar, those things become attractive. And so what we're seeing from a consumer standpoint is we're seeing a shift in less economical and more reasonable stress test against maybe safety, maybe what if, those types of things. And those are driving the equation. So, personally, I have solar in my house. I have 2, Tesla wall batteries, and, I can run my house here in Arizona. I didn't do it for the ROI. My ROI is 20 years. That's not the case. The case is I did it for, predictability, safety, concern, things of that nature. So I think, to your point, the resiliency of the home, these technologies, if we can balance the economics, I think as more folks become more independent, that also helps drive costs down, which then makes batteries more attainable for everyday folks as well. And I think that's what this mainstream needs to get to. I think storage is a key. It's a big future in storage.
Resiliency is the number one thing we hear from customers on an initial consult. Whatever the reason is, I want to survive the next COVID. I want to make sure I don't get a football game invented. I'm a stock trader. They all have a reason why power is really important to them. The reality is it's important to all of us. But it is 100% the number one driver when I'm talking to a consumer about why they're doing this. Maybe it started with, I want to feel green, but I think as they discover what's possible, they start buying into it more now than 20 years ago, for sure.
So I think we're living in very unusual times right now. I think that's fair to say. We have wars going on, and Congress is kind of a mess, and the political thing is less than optimum. And we got prices of houses skyrocketing. We have 20-year high interest rates. What we as an industry have to do is help people say, that's okay, you know. We're gonna build your home, and we're gonna build it right, and it's gonna be resilient, and it's gonna be energy efficient, and it's gonna be healthy. Trust us, we're gonna be just fine, you know. There's very few industries that can do that. We have the ability to do that.
And I feel that consumers are smart enough that they will pay for a good product. Would you agree?
No question.
Your home buyers appreciate what you do, and they'll pay a little extra for it, and they're okay with it.
We know we're charging more than every other builder for our house, okay? But it's better.
Yeah.
The communities are better, the houses are better, we have more options, we have better designs, we have, you know, it's more efficient. We'll be the first home builder to build all our homes with zero energy ready in Phoenix. That's pretty good. The national guys are scrambling, but they're not gonna catch up. It takes them too long. They're trying to move the battleship with a Q-tip, you know, and it just can't. We can move a little faster.
So we've got on the screen two technologies from companies here at the table. One is solar tiles. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our parent company is GAF. GAF is the largest shingle manufacturer in the country, and we are GAF Energy, and we've developed the world's first nailable solar shingle. So Elon Musk came out with this solar tile about 3 or 4 years ago, and of course has displaced the automobile industry. So the ownership group at Standard Industries, who's been around 130 years, got together and we took a photovoltaic scientist and a roofer and locked them into a room and said, don't come out until you create a product where, you know, we're keeping the integrity of the roof. So with traditional solar panels, you poke a bunch of holes in the roof and mount it, which is great. That's my background, come from that. But I think now we're, you know, the product evolution is now what's called BIPV, or Building Integrated Photovoltaic. And that's when you have a product that is basically a window, or in our case a shingle, and you've embedded solar technology into it. But first and foremost, it's a product. And so that's the next generation of solar, as we're trying to stretch the boundaries there, is bringing 2 industries down to 1, letting the roofer go ahead and install the shingle, and the solar shingle. Fully walkable and kind of really cool technology that is kind of game changing.
Fully walkable, you can walk on them.
Stamp on it, run on it. We have a third floor. We have a display. You can kind of go touch it. But yeah, I think that's the section where the technology aspect is pushing. You know, we're getting away from the traditional, some of the traditional things. And I know with storage, you know, you're doing a lot of the same stuff where it comes to like, you know, the hours and how long you're getting out of these batteries.
We're cousins there, right? So like the PV is coming down into the inverter, and
correct.
You know, we're on our side, you know, the inverter's on the top of that battery stack there, and effectively, you know, we got to understand what's coming in and then decide, you know, depending on state of charge and the mode we're in, are we charging that battery? Are we offsetting that energy back to the grid? And it's important to note that like, the solar industry survived a long time on net metering being an attractive element to the investment, right? Oh, I can sell excess back, but you can't do that anymore in California, right? So, you know, storage is almost inevitable because if you don't have storage, it doesn't matter that you have awesome solar shingles, you can't do anything with them when the grid is offline. So, you know, battery technology and solar integrated is going to be huge, huge.
What drove California to make net metering no longer exist?
You know, I can't speak for California, but what I've heard is that effectively there were too many people and too much cash going back to people, and there was enough solar.
It was working too well.
Where they felt like the break even was there. It had done its job and stoked the market. So they've lowered the rates in the new rating, and it's almost silly to do it. It's pennies when you're getting charged dollars from the utility.
And so that, as solar gets adopted in other states, I know certainly there are other states that are kind of on the forefront with California, but there's plenty like where the power has been relatively cheap that have not adopted solar as fast. But that will likely be the natural evolution within a state, is as they get adopted, maybe they're using net metering to incentivize it, but at some point they're like, okay, we've got enough. We're not going to pay you for that. You're on your own now.
I think the ignored space, and the space that is going to wake up to solar, is agriculture. And that's largely that big swath of country where there's a couple structures on a very large plot of land. You've got electric tractors that are starting to hit the market that are self-driving. So the farmer drives that field once, records it, and then schedules the thing to do it. It's got to park, it's got to charge. So I think there's a different strategy for the traditional sort of center of the country and our big agriculture base. Yes, Florida, California, West Coast, East Coast, where you get a lot of sun and you have more densely populated affluence. You're seeing a lot of investment, but I wouldn't ignore our agriculture at all. I think it's probably the least paid attention to from a federal program perspective and the most in need of it.
How do you, and I'm going way off script here, so I appreciate they've just been rolling with the punches as I'm asking questions that pop into my mind, but how do you see EV adoption, which we know is just really starting to get that adoption curve? How does that drive both of your technologies as well, particularly because it's using energy during the day, wants to recharge at night when the solar panels aren't working. So I imagine battery is kind of a pretty key link if you don't have net metering in place.
Yeah, my personal opinion is that I'm not going to invest in an EV until I can power it from stored energy, because ultimately I got rid of a gas bill, but I've raised my energy bill. And I'm not sure that my energy bill will be less than my gas bill. So
especially where you live.
Right, and so for Los Angeles, that's a interesting calculation to do. Most people that are buying EVs are doing it as a status symbol, and that's fine. That's how things start. They're still very expensive. They still don't quite drive as far as people think they want a car to drive. And we don't have a battery technology yet that has subsided the charging anxiety that one experiences with an EV. So if you drive to work 4, 5, 10 miles a day, buy an EV, by all means, but if you're doing a traditional commute, if you're, carpooling and this, it's still somewhat the toy of those that can afford it. I think we still have a little ways to go. I'm not convinced that EVs are the ultimate answer, personally. I'm a hydrogen fan. We're real off script here. Japan has a new approach of building what they call red hydrogen, which is hydrogen that is a byproduct of nuclear power plant. They don't know, there's not been a way to get rid of it, but they've figured out a way to process it and use it. Toyota has a new hydrogen hybrid engine. So I think EVs are going to not be EVs entirely 10 years from now, and that it's somewhat a stepping stone. And that's largely because the cost has been outrageous. Most people can't afford a car that's more than $55,000, and even that's a stretch. There isn't an EV you can buy that doesn't start at $70,000 or $80,000.
And I think we're starting to see it on the building side. We're starting to see the solar and the battery in conversation with the EV. So if they're going solar, they're going storage, builders are also talking about EV as a solution. So we're grouped in with it, which is fine.
Yeah.
Right? That's great, I think. But I think the evolution of EV is just starting to hit like a mainstream builder where, it's expected that you're going to have an EV charger in some markets.
Yeah.
Probably
Do you
built in.
guys have chargers as part of your plans?
We sell it as an option, and we sell 6%. So 6% of the people take it.
Wow.
That's a level 2 charger inside the home?
Yeah. Well, we have two. So we have
The level
Tesla
one.
one. We have another 50 amp. So, but it's not huge.
Yeah. It's early.
And of course, the utility companies want us to put them standard in every house.
Yeah.
And we're going, I don't think so.
I know in Kansas, our utility company will give a sizable rebate for installing, but they want to, in exchange, they want to be sure they can kind of control when you're using it, or at least give you pricing that incentivizes you using it off peak hours, which makes sense. Yeah.
So they'll rebate us $300, and it costs us $500.
Yeah.
It's not, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
I'm curious here in the room, how many of you have taken the EV plunge yet, or are driving EVs? Okay. They're fun to drive, aren't they? I took the plunge 3 months ago, and I don't know. I'm probably going to disagree with you. I think there's more and more people using that. Agreed. There's range anxiety. There's some things that it's a different driving experience.
For me, it's all about Los Angeles.
Yes.
Like it's just very expensive. So, I'm not using more energy than I was 3 years ago, but my bill is 3 times as high.
Yeah, but to your point, where you are, yeah, you'd only want to do it if you know the energy's free and you've got solar panels that are.
I might be a dinosaur in that regard. I still encourage those that are buying to do it. I just haven't made sense of the economics personally yet. But integrated solar into the building is huge. The glass that's actually on a high rise that's contributing to the overall needs of the building is massive. This is. I'm not a fanboy, no one's paid me for this, but this is probably a super critical moment here where we're starting to see more efficient solar cells being integrated into other products, which has not been a thing at all. Mm-hmm. I think I said earlier, a buddy of mine's an integrator, and he was telling me he's doing a house where the architect found Spanish tile that allows UV to pass through. It's still Spanish tile, but you mount the solar array below it, and then you can do the tile over it, which I don't know how you service it. But if you have spent $100,000 on Spanish tile for your house, you probably want to see it.
You can do that.
Yeah. So,
to your point in the building envelope, if you're building a new home and you have a solar shingle that every home needs a roof, and you've integrated that in, the economies of scale say that we can put this on a manufactured home or a $10 million home. That's when you can hit that sort of market where you've got something for every home that's out there, because that cost has been absorbed through just economies.
I would have chosen that shingle. I had to redo my roof 4 years ago. It would have been a no-brainer, but at the time it was like you couldn't get the other guy's stuff, and it just wasn't viable yet. But I think that's one of those key elements to overcoming the existing inventory that's out there. Is all those houses are going to need a new roof. They're going to need new windows eventually. And if in those moments we've figured out a way from a technical perspective to integrate some production without massive changes to the house, it can be, I don't want to say game changing, but it can be a very important step towards making the existing inventory of houses more efficient. Because what are you going to do with a 100-year-old house?
The other thing that I'm super passionate about is entry-level homes. We sit here, we talk about solar, we talk about all this technology and the advancements. Are these for $700 to $1 million homes, or are these for your starter home or your manufactured home? So I think in America, what we need to do is we need to harness the challenge for all of us is how do we make this mainstay so we can put this in a starter home? Because what's really, the affordable house is becoming unaffordable, as as rates are going up, as you've mentioned. And then maybe they do get the down payment, maybe they do get their first house, but now they've got this humongous energy bill, And so I think as a group, we owe it to ourselves to make sure that we're not just the affluent, that we're getting it all the way down, through starter homes and first, because it's threatening affordable home ownership.
We're looking at buying a new home in Oregon, and I am having a really challenging time finding a house that is listed, like it's not in MLS, it's not on Zillow, it doesn't say solar ready unless it already has solar. So like there's still this disconnect between customer demand and the building community, and that's always the case, right? The consumer typically moves faster than industry, and then we hurry up to catch up. But I think the builders that step up, that integrate, that make it part of their marketing, that communicate are going to be here. I would say, I think, our Savant's approach to making the panel smart, while it's not a first house thing, adding $3,000 to the build, it is definitely sort of that middle second home or, affluent first time buyer kind of addition. And I think there's going to be other ways, smart, outlets that report and other things that are going to start helping, just basic structures be more intelligent.
I agree with you. And this morning in the earlier panel, I shared, I'm on the board of directors for our Habitat for Humanity. It'll be 3 builds in a row have incorporated solar panels into them. And this is a small 1,200 square foot home, but solar panels, SIP construction, so it's an airtight envelope. We got insulation, under the foundation, all the walls, the roof, heat pump, an ERV, and it's granted it's in the Midwest, and the city it's in is kind of on the outskirts of town, but it's appraising at $170,000, and the cost of ownership of being able to rent it's almost net zero, and that's. I firmly believe that we should be building more houses like that. There's absolutely a market for those type of houses. And for whatever reason, and if you as a builder can tell me why that doesn't pencil out, let me know, because we're doing it as Habitat. We've got the plans and designs, and we'd love other builders to be building the same thing. We want everyone to have an affordable home, but there's some barrier there that seems to be keeping it from happening.
I think a lot of it too, as you mentioned, the appraised value. What we're seeing out there is Fannie Mae is now recognizing HERS and these scoring systems, right, as something that you can put into your 1004 form and appraised value. Problem is, if you're the first one in the neighborhood, then your appraised value is you don't have a comparable, right? So there's now some talk, and it's exciting because I think this will help us. There's some talk that the Appraisal Institute of America is recognizing, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are actually looking into, how do we pass these through automated underwriting, but give it a score of a HERS rating of 45, and that adds, 3 to 6% value to the home. And so if you can now start adding it to the value of the home in a true appraisal without needing comparables next door, now you've got something to where you can go to the homeowners and say, your home will appraise. You're spending this extra money. Builders can then challenge and say, hey, if you're not going to spend. So I think the next evolution of this is how do we evaluate? We know these changes are being done. They do cost money. They take energy from everybody to do this. But if it shows up an evaluation of a house, like you mentioned, that's where the rubber hits the road. And I think that's where you'll start getting some more headway and be able to, take this thing to the next level. So we're not there yet, but I think it's a start.
So these are things that, are relatively new.
Yes.
So the industry takes a long time to adapt to these things.
Yep.
We finally got Energy Star in on MLS, about 5 years ago. But it takes a while.
Yeah.
So things like Indoor Air Plus, it is a fairly new program, and Zero Energy Ready is a fairly new program. There's no question at the time it'll be on your MLS listing, and you'll have credit for it, and you'll get a better loan and things like that. Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? There would be
it just makes sense.
If you have a house that has none of that, and you have this house that has,
which one do you want?
There should be a valuation
Exactly.
based on that.
And it'll happen.
It'll happen.
How many of you with your new homes are getting them with a HERS index rating? Almost everyone, maybe about 2/3. So for maybe those that aren't, can you just explain real briefly what the HERS index is?
So HERS is kind of like the miles per gallon sticker you see on a new car. And so the Resnet company, which is a nonprofit thing that all the raters belong to, they've adapted HERS ratings through various programs and computer programs and guys like Egotrope and things like that. And they kind of figure out what you put in the house, and then they figure out by floor plan and by square footage where that HERS rating is, okay? And you get, 3 points for this, and you get 3 points for that, and 4 points for this, and 1 for this. And, basically you can build your house any way you want, as long as you do the prescription method that Energy Star understands, and Indoor Air Plus understands, and Zero Energy Ready understands. But then how you get to your lower HERS score, you might want to do a better window to get you 2 points and things like that. So a typical new home around the country is about 100, you know. To be Energy Star, I think now is 60, something like that. And then you're under 50 for Zero Energy Ready. And so we have a sticker. We have a thing on it. Every homeowner knows what their HERS score is, and for every floor plan. And if we have a different option on a floor plan, we have to adjust that score. So, you know, we carry 120 floor plans, and with each one with 10 different room options, so we got 1,000 things we gotta figure out. So our energy raters kind of help us with that, but it's a very complex system.
Okay, so for those that are using HERS, you can raise your hands up again, and what I'm curious, you keep your hands up, and I'm going to go like down the scale. I just want to get an idea of kind of where your average homes are in your, so hands up for those of you that are using HERS. Okay, everyone, hundreds, your average is 100, okay, 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30.
Wow.
Okay. That's great.
Hey, by the way, yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
I think in our conversation beforehand, I don't think we would have expected that, so that's great to
Great.
see. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to move back a little bit just about holistic approaches here. So beyond the individual technologies, and we've talked about a handful of them, how does a holistic approach towards energy efficiency, including insulation methods, HVAC, water conservation, how does that contribute to building a better home?
Well, I'll shoot myself in the foot. I'm in the solar business, but I think solar's the last thing you put on. I think why put solar on and max out your roof when it all goes out the eaves and you haven't done the other stuff first? Yeah. So I think a holistic approach is looking at the entire building package and then starting with stuff that you can afford, especially if you're doing a remodel. Maybe the windows are that's in the budget.
Right.
Maybe insulation, maybe the sewer rating on your new AC unit or heat pump.
All things.
Those are all things. Then come to us and finalize the cherry on the top with the solar once you've gotten all that done. And I think our industry's gotten it backwards a little bit. So I think just, you know, again, being an industry veteran, I'm all about the holistic approach. I think that's the right way to do it.
I think it's true, and when I'm talking about the habitat home, because everything in the inside has been built that way, the number of solar panels it needs on the top are a lot less than you'd think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on that?
So I think we haven't talked about water. The water's a big deal. And if you live in the West and you touch the Colorado River, you see it every day. And so water is not getting any better, and it's getting worse. And I think we as an industry, we use a tremendous amount of water. And most of the water we use in our homes is not inside the house. It's outside the house. And so those are things like pools and landscaping and things like that. So what we've done is we build all our homes water sense. And so how that works is we control the HOAs, fortunately, and so we make it so each house has to have a sensor that takes care of their landscaping. And we specify the sensor, and then they have to do it, and it's an HOA thing. So we don't install any yards, but we offer things like artificial turf and pavers and things like that. And so those people could mortgage that before they move in. They use an outside landscaper, but we dictate all the plant that they can use and things like that. And the reason that more builders don't use WaterSense is because they can't qualify for WaterSense because they're not in control of their community. You have a developer in control of the community, and they don't really care. And so when a builder's in charge of a community, which we are, so we build our own master plans, we're able to kind of dictate how people use water. And it was very easy. We worked with the EPA Department of the WaterSense people, and they were thinking, oh yeah, you can do this, and we were certified. You know, there's only two builders in the country that are WaterSense, us and KB Homes. It's crazy.
So I would imagine a good number of the builders here in the room don't have that ability to control it. Are you saying rethink your strategy and look for ways to be able to do
We need
it.
to put pressure on the developers to make sure we don't have runaway water things. And there's a big community out here in the east of town, and they built, 5,000, 6,000 homes, and they have a turf requirement. You have to put in X amount of grass. Well, that just kills your water bills. So if you build there, they don't care. They want grass, and they're using a ton of water. Now, fortunately, they're just about built out, so they won't have to worry about that. But I think in the future, you need to put pressure on the developers to say, hey, I want drought-resistant plants, and I want, emitters, and I want things like that that'll save water.
Questions on that? Okay. Other thoughts on water efficiency?
So everyone's got emitting, showers and low flush toilets and everything like that, because you can't buy high flush toilets. You just can't. And you can't buy shower heads that spill out all this water. So everyone's got that. So, but again, that's only 10% of the water usage in a house.
I think we've kind of touched on this. I'll ask the question if you think there's anything you can add to it, then we'll do that. Otherwise, we can move on. How has the market responded to energy efficient innovations, especially post-pandemic, with the rise in demand for quality indoor environments?
I think some of the legislation that's been passed, not a political statement at all, just the Green New Deal has gotten some things passed through. We have the Inflation Reduction Act, and we've got the ITC, income tax credit for solar, extended now, 30% for another 10 years. So I think you're seeing the need for some more support. Because we're not at economies of scale yet, and then solar would not be where it is today without that, federal income tax credit. And so I think those are good things to help, shore up the technology. But we probably need a more balanced kind of approach. There's the utilities you mentioned. There's rebates available there, and I think all of those things said, when I think the pandemic forced another look at all of that as we're starting to work out of our homes and do a little bit more of that stuff. I think folks are looking more at, hey, if that happens again and I'm at my house, how will I respond to that? And so I think you're seeing post-pandemic, you're seeing, and in a higher interest rate environment too, which is encouraging. So adoption hasn't slowed.
That's good. I kind of wrote some notes about, what is the value of federal incentives? How are they supposed to work? They're supposed to help reduce the initial costs for the adopter. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to encourage innovation to get more companies in and saying, hey, we can have a product that becomes viable because of these incentives, and it encourages them to innovate. Definitely stimulates the market. It can provide environmental benefits, as we've talked about. But there's the economic growth aspect as well, as the development and adoption of new technologies can spur economic growth by creating these new industries and jobs. Yeah. We see more education and awareness because it's out there. It helps these companies scale, and as they scale and do more of these, we should see the cost reduce. And I think Tesla is a perfect example of that we've seen over the last decade. Of as they've been able to scale the production of cars, it's allowed them to be able to bring the cost down. And Model 3 and Model Ys are lower cost now than they've ever been.
It's also the confluence of lots of things taking root, right? There's federal and state incentives, there's utility incentives, there's new technology, there's better materials. And so, all of those things landing during COVID did really spur a lot of thought and commitment to the category. Certainly the phones are ringing. People are buying this regardless of interest rates. As Scott said, if somebody decides this is what they want to do, there's a million ways they can do it. They're going to go do it.
There's an element of global competitiveness too, because when you look at what other countries are doing in the area of energy efficiency, we're behind. And if you don't believe that, you need to go schedule a trip to Europe. You need to go. We took students on a study abroad trip in spring to Germany and to Amsterdam, and you look around and just see how much the technology is already coming down to the frontline resident in these cities, and the students ask us why aren't aren't we doing that in the U.S.? It's like, that's a good question. It's the right question to be asking.
Imagine if every supermarket had to produce the energy it consumed.
Yeah.
That row of refrigerators we all walk down looking at, opening, closing, it's the biggest draw of their energy consumption. We don't do anything about that. So I think there's a million ways that we can actually attack this and start making steps forward. It takes will and commitment and a functioning Congress and House. So there's that.
Yeah, I think there's, just for an example, there's part of the code that had domestic content added to some of the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the ITC federal money out there for solar. Perfect example of let's bring it stateside, right, and get a little benefit. So, our shingle is manufactured in the U.S. in Austin, Texas, and you can't say that about many solar providers at all coming out of China. So I think more incentive of that to make stuff here in the U.S. Will benefit the whole industry for sure.
Yeah, and 3D printing is not yet at full steam. There's 3D printed houses with concrete that are okay, but there's a lot of 3D printing that's happening in the plastic and electronic space that's going to have application with new material. So it's conceivable to think that one could have a factory building solar panels with a couple of robots and 5 or 6 humans that's producing enough solar panels for a new master plan, not shipping them anywhere, right? Somebody invests in that initial factory and away we go. So I don't know, I'm always an optimist about this stuff. I think, similar conversations were had about the printing press, and how it was going to change everything. And so that's what technology does, is it spurs change. Some of that change is good. Some of it won't be as good as before, and we'll figure out how to fix that. But if we're doing it right, we're making positive steps forward as we're inventing new solutions to problems.
So as we kind of wind things down in about 3 or 4 minutes, and if you have any questions that you feel have been unanswered, feel free to raise your hand and chime in. As we kind of look at the real world application, any specific success stories or real world examples where you're seeing the adoption of energy efficient technologies have just significantly benefited, a single home or an entire residential construction project?
I'll give you my own personal example. I have a house that was built in 1993, about 20 minutes down the road here in Arizona. Our energy bill was $500 a month. It had 1993 windows. It had blown-in insulation that had dilapidated. We spent, prior to, then we did a nice remodel. First thing we did was the windows. Then we went in and did all the insulation, and we got rid of 2 older AC units and got high HERS ratings. We got variable speed pumps on the pool. We did all that, and then we did solar on top and did the batteries. And so I think our bill is $40 a month. Now, the upfront investment and the capital in that was quite a bit. But we needed new windows anyway. So we're at that 25 to 30-year home that then needed to be redone, right? And so through that process, we were just very thoughtful of the efficiencies, took advantage of them, and then the end result is now we have a quasi-newer home where everything's been done and upgraded. We invested in that, but now we're the beneficiaries of that lower bill, and that's for the next foreseeable future. So that's one example just personally that I can share.
And you can take that same philosophy and apply it to a new home. And this will kind of be a little bit of a tease for tomorrow morning when we talk about selling and marketing it, of being able to show what is the total cost of ownership in the home, and comparing it to, you can buy 2 new homes right now. One that's got all this energy efficiency baked in may cost you a little bit more up front versus one that doesn't, but then start looking at the $400 a month versus the $50 a month over the lifetime you're going to be in that home, and it should make it a pretty clear decision.
I think one of the things that is encouraging that in our area is we're a big advocate of Indoor Air Plus, and we've won all these awards, and we've led the nation in really talking about clean air and healthy homes and things like that. And what we see is people that have moved into their house, they go, this is different. This house is different than my current house, And we've had people that used inhalers and threw them away. When you hear things like that, you go, wow, That's better than saving $50 on your air conditioning bill, because you're touching people's lives.
Yeah.
And I remember this one gal, I always ask people, we have a get-together, we invite buyers to our design center every other Thursday night, and so I always ask people, why'd you buy one of our homes? And she said, it's that air thing. And she bought one of our homes because of the air thing, you know. And I think that's what I look at and go, wow, this is special. We're really building healthy homes for people.
That's great.
So as we kind of wrap up this particular topic in this session for today, I want to have the last, about 10 minutes here. I'm going to turn it, over to our sponsor. This session has been sponsored, and let Aaron tell us a little bit more about Savant, your products, and this is now your chance to. It's a commercial.
Awesome.
At least commercial.
I thought his whole thing was a commercial.
Yeah, no, that was me.
So hi, I'm Aaron from Savant. Some of you have already been in a track with me or two, so I won't try and repeat myself too much. We are a home automation company that 15 years ago began introducing power into our ecosystem. Today we have a complete power solution, from battery storage to turning the electrical panel smart and all the software to manage that, living right inside the same app our customers use for HVAC control and shading, lighting, all the other fun stuff in the house. In 2020, we acquired a little company called GE Lighting. We've got a whole entry-level product line from GE called Sync that is perfectly priced for production home or semi-custom, including full-color bulbs and full-color 3 and 4-inch replacement wafer lights for the ceiling. Our goal is to build a more sustainable world, and we're trying to get there while still keeping everything fun and easy to use. And so, if you're interested in making your home's feature a microgrid, if you're interested in taking the next step, we're interested in talking to you. We're not a new company. We've been in business for just our 19th year, almost 20th year in business. We've got factories all over the world and thousands of homes that we're deploying every year. So we're usually coming out with new stuff all the time. This year we've got left in the hopper is a direct Siri integration, where our customer will be able to press the CarPlay Siri button in the car and ask Siri to turn the lights on in the garage and open the garage, and she will go do that. So we're really trying to push the envelope on all sides. For this audience, we're very focused on lighting, networking, and power. These are really the three of the key foundational elements of someone's experience in a home, and we believe we've got an awesome solution for all of those categories. So that's why we spend time here talking to builders. If you are interested or want to know more, come find me. I'm easy to find. And thanks a lot. We hope we didn't make your lunch any worse or better than it might have been.
And I have messed up. My audio decided to die. So I might have messed up on the slides once again when I copied this over. There's some text you're supposed to read here, so I'm going to play the role of reading this text, and I want to make sure Aaron's slides get all full credit here. So on the top left, environmental control has long been a driver of smart. Think climate, lighting control, and shades, all from your smartphone. Moving to the right, top center, lighting intelligence is not just for the switch anymore. Think smart fixtures, sub $35 MSRP. And we're doing some remodeling in our basement. It was actually when I was at this conference a year ago, our basement flooded. That was the first night, and my wife calls me and trying to figure out where this water is coming from. It's taken us almost a full year to get this fixed, and we just barely finished about a week ago. But as part of that, I've been redoing a lot of the fixtures and doing a lot of smart lighting, and it's amazing. Okay, top right, also smart lighting. It's maturing to allow for professional installment and homeowner configuration. Future additions, question mark. Bottom left, electrification of the home has only just begun. Bottom center, intelligence at the panel is foundational to smart infrastructure and power management. And to dive into this just a little bit more, because we've got some time, you have the ability that when the grid goes down, that you can then smart control which circuits are still getting power
100%.
from the smart battery.
So that power module you see floating in that lower right corner there's some software, patent software on there that basically we've created an EKG for grid power, is the way to think of this. So there's a very repeating, steady pulse that comes from grid power as it's coming into the house. If we miss that 3 times in a row, which is roughly 3.5 milliseconds, we actually know the grid is offline. And so what's cool is in most instances, you would think that some processor knows first, but in power, we actually send that information back up. So the modules react instantly, and as you're installing this, you're telling the software, this is a critical load, this is a critical load, and those identified critical loads never shut off. The automatic transfer switch, to your point, in that 3-4 milliseconds has moved from grid power, which doesn't exist anymore in theory, and to battery, and that power is instantly aggregated into the house via the inverter. So, you're talking no lights flickering, and your phone telling you from an alert on the Savant app that the grid just went down. That's how fast it is, really. And so, to me, at a minimum, and I'll say this the whole thing, if you do nothing else to take that next step, we would encourage you to make that electrical panel smart. If we win that brand battle, awesome. If our competitors do, awesome, we'll try and win it later. But I think we're all doing the right thing for the consumer and the right thing for our business and your business, is that just with that electrical panel, we believe, Savant writ large, you can advertise that home as a smart home. Nothing else, if you do nothing else. Now, other people may argue with you, where's the speakers, where's my television, all that good stuff. But I've talked about this before, that Tesla effect or that Prius effect on a homeowner that now can see their per kilowatt hour consumption
by device,
by load, and then hopefully correlated to a device. Yep. You can't unknow that.
Yeah.
It's something you just don't forget. And the example I'll give you is I was working with a customer 2 years ago who decided, I'm not going to do battery and solar right away, but I want to do the smart panel. That makes sense to me. He figured out in the first 3 weeks of living in the house that his pool pump was eating almost 30% of his kilowatt usage. What did he do? He changed his behavior himself. Just because he knew now, oh my God, 30% of this whatever bill is just the pool. That doesn't compute.
Like you said, the Prius effect of where you were able to see exactly your miles per hour driven in like a 5-minute segment and to connect the behavior of how I drive to what my miles per gallon.
The best way to change a human's behavior is through knowledge usually, and being able to correlate that, understand what that knowledge means.
Yep.
And so I think it's a big deal. And as someone looking to buy a new home, anyone in Portland, Oregon, call me. It's really challenging to find a house on MLS or on Zillow where they tell you this kind of information. So let's be smarter and tell consumers, because I'm one right now and I'm eager for that info. I got to spend 6.5 weeks there for to go look at houses, and also so I'm there to ask that question to the realtor, to the home builder. The Toll Brothers neighborhood that doesn't have any info. I just learned something. Thank you about why, right? So I think it's really important that we lead them. I'm sure we're mostly in here with smaller, regionally based builders and companies. That's how you stand out. It's not the custom kitchen anymore. Everybody's doing that. It's not the speakers and wire everywhere. Generally, that's being done. That needle has moved to smarter power, and this is a great way to do it. So, again, if we don't win your business, we'll try again. But I highly encourage that you check this aspect out and consider it for your business.
Well, thanks again to Savant for sponsoring the session. Join me in a round of applause for our panels today.